What's up, guys? This is Alfonso from Heartsick, hanging out here, and you're listening to Discovery Discussion right now.
And if you learned everything you wanted to know about silence by tipping your bartender, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, and we're talking about Glassjaw with Alfonso from Heartsick. Before we get into that conversation, I want to take the time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, so if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at discussmetal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out, and it lets us know you're listening. Leave us a 5-star review anywhere you listen to us. It's all about algorithms, as Dan says every week, and one thing that helps us get recommended to other listeners who listen to heavy metal podcasts is if you leave us a 5-star review. And if you don't think we deserve a 5-star review, leave us the review you think we deserve. We really appreciate it, and we will read it on the show. I'm done talking. Let's get to Alfonso and Glassjaw.
Oh, Glassjaw is amazing, man. I mean, talk about a band that, me personally, that band, I think, revolutionized what, the new sound of, metalcore could be. You had bands you had bands before them, obviously, like Poison the Well and shit, but there was just something about Glassjaw that was way more raw, you hadn't heard something like that before.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Glassjaw, man, just absolutely blew my mind back in the early 2000s. Because, I came off of shit like Korn and Slipknot into Glassjaw. And it was like a totally, despite what John will tell you about the first album, that album was a huge experience for me. If you want to talk about an album that I love the way it sounds. Looking back on the lyrics now, it's a little cringeworthy, but...
No, it's the same for me, man. I will never forget this. You're going to find out a lot about me right now. So I was, in high school, I was a cheerleader, and I was captain of my cheerleading squad. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it was really fun. And I was part of a traveling cheer camp that would teach cheerleading teams all over the United States. And I was doing my training before leaving to teach in Pittsburgh. And I was in Pittsburgh, I'll never forget this. And White Pony had just come out during that time as well. And then I had bought White Pony for the Deftones, they're my all-time favorite band. And then I was walking down the street and I saw at a record store. So I walked into the record store, and I was looking at the Deftones section, and Glassjaw was in that area too. And it said, for fans of the Deftones. And then there was a flyer in the store, and I was Deftones with Glassjaw, something else or whatever, playing some venue there. And I was fuck it, man. Sounds like I'd like this. And I picked up the record. I'd never heard the band before. I never knew who they were. And I put on that record, and the first song, dude, I'm so bad with song names, but the first song on that record, I was just what in the fuck is this? And it just blew my mind because, I was, up until then, I was coming up on bands like Korn. I was, the first metal bands I heard were Madball and Sick of It All and shit like that. I was really into hardcore, but I really got into the whole kind of groove and new metal stuff. So Korn was something I was really listening to. So listening to jazz Glassjaw, I was just this is insane, dude. This, it just blew my mind, man. You had mentioned lyrically, it's a little, but honestly, dude, I was just listening to the record on this drive out here to this show, and I don't know, man. I think there's to me, that record lyrically is still awesome because it's still raw and emotional. Even though you could tell the guy was Daryl was probably 19 or some shit.
Right. What kind of person are you when you're 19?
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's what made it, man. That vitriol and that anger and that angst in that, dude, he just didn't give a fuck in those lyrics. And I thought that, to me, that's awesome. And I think that nowadays that's something that's really missing, because you don't have a lot of artists that are doing that now. Everybody sort of wants to please whatever crowd, and that record was just like, nah. I think we were still in the stages of like, make what you want to make lyrically, and it was just awesome.
Right. And then the lyrics and the passion and the vocals were great, but then the music itself was like a whole different breed, because there were chord changes and shit going on that I just couldn't, like, my mind couldn't really wrap my head around, because this is before I'm listening to shit like, like Coalesce or Botch and, all those crazy bands, which they obviously, were out around the same time.
Nora.
Yeah. And so, like, I had no idea, if it wasn't for Glassjaw, I wouldn't be listening to those bands.
Exactly. And that was the thing, man. It's like listening to that record, like, my band, so Heartsick, once a year we do like a covers show, and for the last couple of years, we've gotten stuck on doing the Deftones because we know them really well and people really like that. But we've always, like, we did one year, we did Poison the Well. Another year, we did Weezer and stuff. But one band that we're always talking about, like, yo, we need to cover this, is Glassjaw. But then you listen to their record and you're like, there's no fucking way, dude. Like, the playing in that is insane, like, immaculate. Like, you need, as a musician, if you listen to that record, the drums are impossible. Like, your drummer's got to be an animal, and then like the bass lines are ridiculous. All the guitar intricacies that they're doing, like how they layered the guitars and like the chords they're using are a bunch of jazz chords, dude. It's hard, man. Like, it's a really, really, really hard record to play.
Yeah.
So like, I agree with you, because until then you weren't really listening. You didn't have that. You didn't. Like, what was popular was like bands like Korn and shit, where it's just like bar chords and power chords and barely any solos or anything. And here comes Glassjaw. It's like, no, fuck all that. We're gonna do all these crazy jazz chords and then add in all these like single noted, like arpeggiated like notes with a bunch of delay. But dude, it was crazy, and it still is. It really is.
Do you think they put a lot of thought into it, or was it like a Mars Volta situation where they were just talented musicians hanging out together, and that's what we got?
I don't know. That's a really good question. That's an interesting question. I think that it's, listening to that record, I think that it's both. I think knowing Glassjaw now and how they've developed their sound and their records, and knowing that Beck is the guy basically behind all the music, you could definitely see that. I'm sure that he had some sort of vision and it was sort of somewhat purposely done. But at the same time, I feel like when you had a guy like Ross Robinson manning that project, the more chaos that he could create with that band, the better. So I think it was a mixture of like, yeah, let's do this purposely, but also like, how chaotic can we make this because it feels so chaotic emotionally, So I think that it kind of ebb and flows and kind of pulls and contrasts with those things. So I think that's a really good question. But from my perspective, I think it'd be a little of both, man. With someone like Ross Robinson behind, the production of that, I definitely think that with him, it was like, let's make it more chaotic. And then with Beck, it's like, well, I have all these cool little ideas and I want to do this here. So I think could be a little of both.
Yeah, and like one of the things people criticize the most with Glassjaw is Daryl's vocals, but it's one of those things where the more I listen to it, the more I'm like, I can't think of a way that he could have done any better than he did, in the sense that because the songs were so chaotic and so intense, he kind of just weaves in and around everything or on top of it in such a way to try to match the intensity of the music. And like, I love the way Daryl's voice sounds, but whenever I would show it to my friends and stuff, they'd be like, what the fuck is this? But like, it definitely, I don't think anybody was really singing with that type of passion at the time and still having to weave his way. Cause like, I'm, a vocalist myself, and it's really hard sometimes when somebody hands you a complicated piece of music, you're like, well, shit, how the fuck am I supposed to sing over that? And it's, like what he ended up doing ended up becoming his signature sound.
Dude, I agree 100%, man. Like, to me, what, at the end of the day, as a vocalist, at the end of the day, what really matters isn't whether you're a good quote-unquote singer or not. It's how you can interpret that emotion into your physical voice and move people. And if you look at it from that aspect, Daryl Palumbo is a master of that, 100%. Like, just like Jonathan Davis is. I mean, like, you know, a lot of these guys that are in these sort of like now legend bands and like pioneering bands, the vocalists are the people who really, like, that's where people latch onto the most. And up until a band like Korn and like Glassjaw and stuff, you had everybody that wanted to be Eddie Vedder or Kurt Cobain, because these were like tones that sounded still sort of like, you know, edgy, but were still safe, I think. And a singer like Daryl goes over people's heads when a record like that comes out, because it's so far advanced to what anybody else is doing. People just can't hear it. Like, people don't. I think that sometimes people are just so narrow-minded as listeners in music that, and then on top of the fact that you have an industry that's made literally a living on making everybody sound the same. And when you have bands like Korn and Glassjaw and things of that nature, it totally blows all those sort of like stereotypes out of the water. You're like, yo, what the fuck is this? And a guy like Daryl, man, like you said, that record would not be that record if it didn't have Daryl's voice and doing what he's doing in that whole record. Like, that dude is pouring his heart out on that record. It doesn't matter if he doesn't feel that way now about it or whatever. And when Ape Dos Mil came out, it was like sort of his apology and stuff, and the voice was a little bit different, but again, it shaped his sound. Like, you know who Daryl Palumbo is. It's like you know who Chino is on any record. Like, you just know those voices. And I think that you're right, dude. Like, listening to that record, it could not have been anybody else. It would not be the iconic record it is if it was anyone else, period. You know, the voice, to me, whether you're a good singer, doesn't matter. It's, can you, as a vocalist, push that emotion and make other people feel it through that music? And to me, that shit's hard as hell, coming from someone who sings in a band, like who makes records. I mean, that shit's impossible. And on that record, Daryl just did it like nothing. You know, I felt like it was just there. You know?
Some of it sounded first take. You know, like some of it just like he just went in there. You know, was just like fuck it and just laid it all down. And maybe that's not what happened, but that's what it sounds like. And because especially like that first song where like he's just like and like he's saying a bunch of shit, you can't even understand him, but like you could still feel it. Like, it's not a deal breaker. Like any other album you'd listen to and be like, the fuck's going on here? This dude's clearly like fucked up somewhere vocally. Like he's lost in the song, but like it doesn't matter. At one point, it almost sounds like he picks up a mic stand and snaps it. Or something. Like, there's a note in that song. There's like a notable. You hear something actually physically snap
breaking
on there. Yeah, and it's just like, holy shit! Like, what am I in for? You know?
Yep. And that's the thing, man. Like, it's those moments on a record like that really make a record that much more awesome. You know, I think that when you listen to a record that has that sort of emotion, it just makes that much more personable and makes that much more, you know, enthralling, because you feel it. You know, I think, like, you know, as someone who loves heavy music and loves rock and roll, the idea that rock and roll should be safe or should somehow have some sort of safe barrier space in the music, this doesn't make any sense. And that record just goes to prove that there was nothing safe about that. Like you said, like the first 30 seconds of that song are a bunch of gibberish. Like, you can barely hear what the dude's saying, and you're just like, holy shit. But the emotion that he puts into those 30 seconds of, like, you know, unaudible lyrics, you're like, dude, yes, you know. And I have searched high and low to see what he says in those parts, like when he's like, and I'm like, I don't think anybody can actually get it. Like, I don't think anybody's actually figured it out.
Yeah.
You know?
What's in the lyric book is like almost like on most of the songs so different than what's actually laid down on tape. It's like, you know, he just like went in there and just did it. And that's where I got my theory that some of it had to have been first take. Like, he just improvised some parts, threw them in, you know, because it just upped the intensity. And, you know, I would say I'm not sure if that was Daryl or if it was Ross pushing Daryl. I think it was probably both. You know, I mean, with Ross Robinson, I keep talking about hearing that snap on the record. That could have been Ross throwing shit at Daryl. You know what I mean? Like, who knows?
Yep.
You know, like that dude was crazy to work with anyway. From what I've heard of all the bands that he's produced, you know, and but yeah, that record is just guttural and so go for the throat. And like I said, it's definitely a record that I love the way it sounds. Like there's parts on there that he does, like as a vocalist, makes my throat hurt just thinking about. Like,
oh, dude,
like
absolutely.
How he'll go, like he'll be singing, like he'll hold a note out for like 15, 20 seconds, and then end it with like this guttural like shriek, and you're just like, there's not enough air in my lungs for that. Like, it just doesn't happen. There's only a couple of other vocalists I can think of that can scream that long or sing that long with no break or anything. And, like, it's not cut and pasted together like it is on records now. Like, that was all done just like one shot.
And I think that's another awesome part about that record. I think that's just another awesome part to me about, like, that whole sort of era of music in metal and hardcore and stuff is, like, the idea that they were still sort of banking on one take, let's do it, just get it all out of the way, like, let's see what happens. And then you have a guy like Ross Robinson that, you know, as a musician, I'm sure that some of those guys were probably like, no, we fucked that up. And Ross is like, no, this is perfect, because even though it doesn't sound great, it has your emotion kind of thing. To me, that was just, like, awesome, you know?
Yeah, and that was everything. I mean, pure emotion. To jump back on the whole lyrics thing, like I said, it's kind of hard now, you know, with the state of the world now, where like you're able to, you can't go on a record and like say some of that shit, you know, like it's just almost too much. So it's definitely one of those weird cases where like I love the way that it sounds, and I love the emotion. I love the way the music itself makes me feel, like with the vocals included and everything. But whenever I look at it lyrically, I'm like, oh, man. Because I got two daughters, and I got, you know, like I have a whole different perspective on things. Whereas, you know, when I was a kid, I was like, fuck yeah, you know, Daryl for life, you know?
Yeah. No, for sure. You know, and it like you're right, man. It's like we live in a different time, and we live in like a different sort of mindset and mentality these days with that. But at the same time, when that record came out, I think it was like exactly what sort of the metal community and, you know, heavy music in general needed, because up until then, you know, you had mostly all the songs, you know, so you had Korn making everything sort of, you know, they kind of built up back that, like, you know, my family life sucked and like I got picked on as a kid or whatever like that kind of lyrics, you know, where everybody started copying that. But then, you know, here comes Glassjaw, here comes Daryl with these lyrics, you know, that reading them back now in today's society and how the world is becoming and becoming, you know, for better or for worse, a lot more PC and stuff. They're pretty fucking misogynistic.
Oh,
when
yeah.
you listen to the record and you listen to how he says it, it's not, it doesn't have this misogynistic like feel more than it has like a dude that's just been so brutally hurt emotionally by some female that he's just letting out all his frustrations, you know. It's not like some dude that's just like super cocky and like making all these misogynistic, you know, words to fit the music. It's really this, you can hear it. It's like this scrawny little dude who invested all his emotion and all his time and all his heart into this particular woman, and she just tore it out, and he just let it bear on that record, you know. And to me, that was awesome. And, you know, and it goes back to, like, you know, I was talking about Korn and stuff. Jonathan Davis did the same thing, but about his childhood, you know. So to me, lyrically, that record till this day still makes a lot of sense and is still a great sort of read, because, you know, we were all like, you know, we were all 19, we were all 18, we were all 20, we were all in love, or thought that we were in love at that time and felt all the same feelings. But you know, Daryl was the guy with the balls to just come out and say, "Fuck it, I'm going to write about this, and I'm going to write about it in the most sincere way. If it doesn't make people happy, then I don't care. If it pisses people off, I don't care." And to me, that's awesome, because that's really what rock and roll should be and what metal should be. It should be those things, you know. It shouldn't be pretty. It shouldn't. It was never meant to be. You know, Black Sabbath, you know, War Pigs. You know, you have these songs, and it's like the lyrics are dark, man. They're dark and they're heavy, but they're delivered in such a way with the notes being in major chords that it's like it didn't feel that dark,
right?
You know?
Yeah, and this record, I mean, well, what was funny too, I used to always tell people, because like my wife is a huge Glassjaw hater, for obvious reasons, you know.
Clearly,
yeah, like, and she's not wrong at all, you know. But it's one of those. One of the things that she's like, it sounds like this guy's emotions are bigger than he is. You know, and I was like, well, that's pretty accurate. I mean, he's, you know, Daryl's not a huge dude, you know, like.
No, he's a super scrawny guy.
So with that, all that's being said about the first record, and this is what we do on Discography Discussion. We take a record, or we take a band, we go through all their records. With Glassjaw, it's easy because there's only 3. It gets a little bit more complicated when we start talking about, like, bands that have like 10 plus albums out.
Yeah.
But you know, we don't have enough time for that tonight, but you know, maybe someday soon we'll get you on for a bigger band, or where it has a bigger cool. Bigger discography. But what was interesting to me is how crazy and passionate that first record, everything you wanted to know about Silence, that's a mouthful, as big as that record was. Whenever we moved into the follow-up, Worship and Tribute, that's when shit started getting real interesting.
That, I mean, like, I really think that record separated like the true down to the nitty gritty Glassjaw fans and like the fair weather fans are like, oh, another heavy band that's supposed to be new metal, you know, like
right.
That record really defined, in my opinion, I think that record really defined their sound. And I think that lyrically, Daryl showed a lot of growth and showed a lot of humility. If you read the lyrics on that record, you're like, damn, dude, like, this is an apology record. This dude's like, you've got record number 1 where he's just like, I fucking hate this, whatever. And this new record is like, man, like, let's dial it back. Let's think about the emotions that I put out on that first record and think about where do they write emotions to put out and how do I feel about that time now, you know?
The record starts heavy. You know, like you drop into that first absolutely. Song and it's like, oh shit, okay, you're thinking going in like, I'm going to get, you know, just fucking pummeled from beginning to end. And then, you know, you kick into the second track and it's still fast, still aggressive. It's like they don't want to let the cat out of the bag right away that this is going to be a different record. and then it just blasts and he's like, Mr. Shiver. And then like from there, you start realizing that this is going to be Daryl's like clean vocal, you know, debut. You know, because like on the first record he sang, but it was like more just like choruses and stuff. You know, on this record it was like, no, I'm gonna take the reins and I'm gonna put myself out there and be vulnerable for the first time, like really vulnerable. Because like screaming and being angry is vulnerable in its own way, but it still comes across as tough guy enough for it not to seem vulnerable. Whereas on this record, he just basically was like, no, this is me. This is where I'm going. And you know, like you said, it was divisive, I think, for fans because, you know, there's a lot of guys, and myself included, on certain bands, I'm like, dude, if it's not heavy, I'm not listening to it, you know?
No, and I agree with that 100%. You know, it was that record, like, you got in for a couple songs, you're like, all right, here we go, round 2, you know, yeah. And then, like, then they hit you with, like, Ape Dos Mil and shit, and you're like, wait, what?
Right.
What's going on here? But not only lyrically and vocally do you hear the evolution of Daryl, you know, in not only his vocal style, but in his age. You can tell that now he's older, he's matured, you know, he's obviously dealt with some life experiences from being on tour in this band, but you also hear more of the development of the band on a musical level. On the first record, you could tell that the band is obviously a very technical band. They can play. But some of the compositions on Worship and Tribute are so jazz influenced and have so many like bluesy types of parts. You're like, yo, these dudes can actually play. Like the bass line in Ape Dos Mil is fucking awesome, dude. And it runs so well with all the arpeggiated and like single notes that are going on in between all of that. And the drum beat, it's somewhat simple, but like, if you listen to that and you count it, you're like, dude, like there's a lot going on here. Musically, I think the band really brought out their talent and their musicianship in this record. To me, that's what stood out the most to me on Ape Dos, on that song particularly, but on the record and Worship and Tribute as a whole was how the band really like came out of that shell. Like it was like, we are not just a New York hardcore, post-hardcore band. There's more to us than this,
Yeah, and that really starts coming out on the B side of the record as well.
Yep.
I mean, because you've got the first part of the record is pretty front loaded. You've got Tip Your Bartender, which is a heavy song. Really like a lot of their more aggressive shit is on the first half of this record. And then you start getting into shit like Radio Cambodia, and Trailer Park Jesus, which are just, incredible compositions in their own right. And they're a little bit more chill. Like, it's weird because, like, I never, would have thought listening to their first record at any point that I'm going to feel good listening to Glassjaw. I never thought I'd be able to chill to Glassjaw. And it's like, no, man, these guys have got me covered. And as a metal fan, it's easy to be like, well, they were, with Radio Cambodia and Cosmopolitan Bloodloss, they were just trying to get a single or whatever, and just kind of shit on it. But at the same time, it's like, no, even if this was still a single, it's an incredible single. It's going to get people into the band that wouldn't have before.
Exactly, and and that's like the biggest part, like, how unfortunately some fans are so very much dismissive of that, when it's like, as a musician, no matter what genre you play, your whole goal is to try and reach as many people as possible. Now, granted, the style of music that you play is going to play some role in how far you can get in that, but it doesn't mean that you need to compromise who you are as a band and as an artist to be able to reach that many people. And I think that record, Worship and Tribute was a testament, no pun intended, because you got a Testament shirt on.
Right.
But a true testament into what a hardcore, post-hardcore metal band could do and what they could be. You have, like you said, you have these Tip Your Bartender, that's coming out and you're like, yo, these guys are ferocious, or you listen to the first record and, when 2/8, whatever, I remember so bad with song names, but, you listen to those songs and then you listen to a song like Ape Dos Mil or Cosmopolitan Bloodloss and things like that, and you're like, there's so much more underneath that you can tell that it didn't come off as contrived, right? It didn't. No. It's not like it was, I hate to say it, but it's not like it was like a Sugar Ray where like they put out that one single, you're like, whoa, and then the next record was like all acoustic songs.
The mainstream fans, yeah, they're gonna dig a track like that, and there's nothing wrong with that because it's still written in the same vein as the other songs on the album. So it's not like one of those bait and switch scenarios that if you show up just for Cosmopolitan Bloodloss, that you're just gonna like shit on the rest of the record, because it doesn't sound the same. And so they did a single. Here's the thing: it's not a single; it's a Glassjaw single, and there's a distinction there because Absolutely. you're still getting the full thing. I'm actually really surprised that Radio Cambodia didn't get released as a single. Because I don't know how well this record did. I didn't really look that up before, but I mean, for me, it was huge, and I assume it being on Warner Brothers, it had to have been fairly successful, especially with a little bit more melodic sound and a little bit less misogynist lyrics, you know?
Oh no, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that the record did well for them. I think that it did better than their first one because it was more accessible, but also because obviously the band finally got some notoriety. But I think what ended up hurting that record the most was the fact that you then find out that, and during this time period, you find out that Daryl has Crohn's disease, and they keep canceling shows. Right,
because that's a major problem. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that that's what hurt that record in the long run as it progressed. Because each record cycle is like you put out a record and you got to tour on that bad boy and just bring it up more and more. And the first record, they were on Warped Tour. They did all this stuff. They were young and vibrant, and it was like boom, boom, boom. So they go back and they do their second record, which, then there was rumblings of they were having problems with Roadrunner because Roadrunner wanted them to do a certain thing because, at that time Roadrunner had all the really big nu metal bands. So it was like, no, you have to do this because this is what's hype. And Glassjaw, especially with Ross, was like, no, we're not going to do that. So I think that in that time, there was some sort of thing going on with the record label and the contract, which is how they ended up on IM Recordings with Ross. I think Ross either helped them get out of their deal with Roadrunner to where they didn't have to put out any more records on Roadrunner, but Roadrunner still sells the record and makes the money off of them.
Yeah, and in 09 they re-released the first record, like remixed or remastered. It sounds kind of like shit now. The original one sounds better, but whatever.
Exactly. And that was the thing. I think they got into a whole thing with Roadrunner, and that kind of was going on. And then they get with Ross and they do Ross's IM Recordings. They put out Worship and Tribute. People are all excited about it. They really love it. But then it's like, they got to keep promoting that record, but they can't because Daryl keeps getting sick, and I think that that's what really hurt that record's sales was the fact that they had all those, just unfortunate situations going on. You got a lead singer who has a serious health issue and needs to take care of himself. You have this whole, you're fighting with your record label who has millions upon millions of dollars and is basically in control of your career. And then you have this one entity that does have a lot of power and sway, but isn't going to be able to keep the corporate dogs at bay either,
Yeah, I mean, and that, I hate to say it, I mean, that pretty much spelled the end of Glassjaw for
Absolutely.
the foreseeable future. I mean, you put out a record in 2002, and then it's 15 years until we get a new Glassjaw record. Was it worth the wait?
It's totally worth the fucking wait, man. I mean, dude, that new record is so far beyond what they did on anything else. Because, I mean, before that, they did put out records per se, but they weren't really records. They were like a collection of these like 5-song EPs, and then you could only get it. And that's the thing, that's another thing about Glassjaw that just blows my mind. Can we talk about how fucking phenomenal they are at selling their product, their merch and shit? It's ridiculous. They're just geniuses on this shit. So like you said, you have a band that has record number 1 come out on a major record label. It does fucking awesome. Record number 2, it does well, but it starts spelling disaster for the band because of all these outlier problems. But the band is still making millions off of their merch. They're not even touring, and they're still making millions off of their merch. And then they put out an EP that you could only get out at the shows, and people are just selling their shows out left and right, and they're only doing it here and there. And in between all that, if you weren't lucky enough to go to one of those shows and get one of those records that they made that'll never be, put on the internet or whatever like that, you're waiting 15 years like we did, And to me, the new record that they put out is absolutely phenomenal. Again, it's just over so many people's heads because they're so far advanced of what the norm and the cool is that you're just like, dude, that first song is incredibly heavy, but it's a jazz song. It's just a heavy ass jazz song, 100%.
Oh yeah, I mean, and really the same could be said for most of the album. The guitar tone on this record is unlike anything I've ever heard.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's just so overpowered. It overpowers Daryl. This is the first album where he's not necessarily front and center. He's a part of the band, but he's not like, so over top of all of it. But it actually works. Like, because I mean, I definitely have had buddies that were longtime Glassjaw fans that are like, man, I don't know about this Material Control record, because some people, they just want more Daryl and nothing else. And I was like, yeah, but this record, like, really, like, because we had the first 2 records to showcase Daryl. I was like, the third record now, man, we're showcasing the whole band. They are on front display for the world to see, and I think it's incredible, man. Like, because now I've also aged, like, since those records came out, and to hear something like this, now I understand more atmospheric music. I understand jazzier music and unconventional methods and all that stuff, and this record has that in spades. Like, it's just uncompromisingly an atmospheric record, and I'm okay with it. It evokes a feeling in me that lasts throughout the whole album.
Yep, absolutely, man. Like, I have a buddy who's just a giant Glassjaw fan. He's in a band in Miami called Falsetta, and like, I mean, the dude's like, if you watch the band live or you watch any like videos of Falsetta playing, like, my buddy's name is Katova, and he looks just like Beck, dude. He rocks it out just like Beck. Like, that's his favorite band. And he called me the day that the record came out. He's like, "Did you hear the new Glassjaw?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, well, "What do you think?" And I'm like, no. What do you think? And same thing. He's like, "Dude, it's just so amazing, man." And it's one of those things where it's like you have to listen to the whole record like 2 or 3 times to really get what they're doing, like. And it's like, and there's people that are like, "Oh, well, it's not worship and tribute, or it's not everything you ever want to know about Silence." But it's like, come on, man, like the dude's in his 40s now. What do you like? Right.
I mean, am I as pissed off of a person as I was when I was 19? Hell no.
Yeah, dude. No, of course not. We all grow up. We all find sort of our center and our balance in some way, shape, or form. And I mean, the guy's like, he's married, he has a kid, like, there's so much different things going on in his life now. Same with Beck, and they've got so many other projects that they've worked on and all these other things, and they come and they put out this banger of a record, in my opinion. But there's so much, I think you said it best, like, there's so much atmosphere in it, man. It's not a one-dimensional record. Like, we can argue that that Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Silence was a very one-dimensional record when it came to sound. It was a heavy record.
Oh, yeah.
Super heavy record. And then we can argue that Worship and Tribute was a 2-dimensional record because, like you said, at the beginning of the record, they give you the Glassjaw that you know and love from, Everything You Want to Know About Silence. But then they flip the script and they start giving you, the mellowed Glassjaw kind of stuff. And so that's a 2-dimensional record. And then you start getting like the EPs and stuff if you had your hands on them. And they were very in between. They kind of weaved in and out of both of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
The third record is really a standalone record. It really is. It's not super heavy, but it has its really heavy moments. But it's not super like accessible and palatable, but it has its moment. But the one thing that is a constant theme in that record is atmosphere. It is just full and packed of atmosphere. There's so much depth in the lyrical content and the compositions of the songs, and then the guys that they got to play on the songs are fucking amazing musicians. I mean, you got 2 of the guys that were in Glass Cloud and did a bunch of other stuff who are just incredible. I think it's like one of the guys is the bass player of Saves the Day or something like that, like just incredible stuff. Really, really incredible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, this record is everything you'd want it to be, I guess, unless you're like a one-dimensional fan, you only like one thing, and that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, it is. Because, I mean, and that's the whole thing. We say this forever, like, just because a band does like a new thing or something different than what you're used to, it shouldn't invalidate the band's previous materials for you. If you only like everything there is to know about, or everything you wanted to know about Silence, then fine, you're cool, man. Just listen to that record and be happy with it,
And be happy, yep.
And but one thing that's interesting about Glassjaw is that there's another band that I'm a huge fan of called Hopes Fall, And
oh, dude,
they're like
listening to that on the drive here.
Dude, they're
so
like
good.
sex to me, man. They're amazing. And but they kind of had a similar go like Glassjaw did, in that they put out music that was super interesting and super different than what everybody else was doing, and were actually extremely innovative. And one of the things when me and John were talking to Adam from Hope's Fall a little while ago, one of the things we asked him is, like, does it ever bother you that bands basically came along that took your influence, sounded like you, took your sound, and they took it to the mainstream? Does that ever bother you? And if I ever had a chance to sit down with Daryl and talk to him about it, that's exactly the question that I would ask him. Is like, how do you feel knowing that you were innovative, but you didn't get the, you kind of got the short end of the stick as far as that stuff goes?
It's so true about so many bands that invent a style that never get the kind of recognition and the size that they should get. And it's weird because those bands were always the support bands to the bands that got bigger. And it's just the weirdest thing. It's like, you've got Glassjaw, who pioneered that, and Glassjaw never got as big as a lot of the bands that they were on a label with. They never got as big as Slipknot. They never got as big as, Nickelback or whatever the fuck, that they're all Roadrunner bands. But those bands influenced so many. I mean, there's so many big bands that are like, oh, dude, Glassjaw, like, oh my, I love Glassjaw, or like, like Failure. Oh my God, I love Failure. But these bands never got that big. They never got as big as the Avenged Sevenfolds and the Lamb of Gods, and all those types of things. And it's crazy because, and I think what it is that it's just so far above and beyond what people understand, that it takes, a good 5 years, 6 years for that first record, when they're on the third, to catch up. And now you have the band you have a band copying that, and now it becomes mainstream and marketable.
Right, because that's 2000. That was a little early,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you didn't really get the whole, like, quote unquote screamo, blow up until like 2005. 2004, 2005.
Yeah, and all those bands were Ape and Glassjaw,
Exactly. I mean, Hope's Fall was like, I remember listening to Hope's Fall in like 2002, dude. Like, our bass player's a giant Hope's Fall fan, and he was listening to that first record like before anybody knew who the hell Hope's Fall was. Just like Every Time I Die and Poison the Well. I mean, all these bands were doing what they're doing before, and other bands picked up on it and made it bigger. They never got that sort of recognition for it.
Yeah, and it's a huge shame. We should live in a world that's different than that people should get.
Exactly.
But, it is what it is. I'm just happy to still have Glassjaw. I'm happy to still have Hope's Fall now recently. Those were bands that I really just thought were gone, and then I get a new Glassjaw album, last year, and I get a new Hope's Fall album this year. So it's like, when people ask me how it's going, I'm like, man, it's going pretty good, like,
going good.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, both those records are still above everybody's heads.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, dude, that Hope's Fall record is fucking killer. Like,
dude, it's so far above and beyond what anybody's doing,
Oh yeah. So if you had a final thought on Glassjaw, just one thing that you think you could sum the band up with, what would it be?
If I had one final thought to sum up the band, I would say, I would say, oh man, it's a hard one, but if I had to choose, like, words for it, would definitely be pioneers. Just a pioneering band, a band that really pioneered a sound that would play out to make some of people's favorite other bands, and they just pioneered that. To me, Glassjaw is the Meshuggah of post-hardcore and screamo kind of thing. Like, that to me is what they are. They were just the pioneers of that sound. They made that happen.
Absolutely. If I had a final thought, I would say passion.
Dude,
Glassjaw
absolutely.
is the passion band. You know what I mean? Like, there was never a compromise made. There was never any kind of, like, restraint shown. Restraint that the restraint that couldn't be chalked up to maturity. You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously he became more restrained on the second album, but it was of his choosing. I don't think anybody stepped in and was like, hey, you need to calm the fuck down, you know? Like,
no, you're right. And you're absolutely right. Like, that's the perfect way to describe him, 100%.
What about you, Joe? What do you got?
Oh, I'm here too.
You're still here, yeah. Sorry, we've just been fanboying out, man.
Hey, when two dudes are having a conversation about a band they like, you don't get in the middle of that. You just stand there and watch it happen. I think Glassjaw is everything that people think they like about what became popular emo. It's raw emotion, it's intensity, it's good musicianship. There's a few bands that kind of cashed in on that thing, like the Mars Volta.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
And there aren't a lot of bands that have as good of material as Glassjaw has in one album. But a lot of them tried.
Yep.
I like The Chariot, but The Chariot tried really hard to put out intense, energetic music. Norma Jean back in the day did the same thing. So I honestly don't know what Glassjaw did that was so good. Some of that might be that they only put out a few records, but I like the records that I have. And I love giving them to people that have never heard them, because there are still those people that think Under Oath is emo. There are people that still think Coheed and Cambria are emo. And I'm not a fan of popular emo, but I love giving somebody Glassjaw and saying that's the closest thing to real emo that you'll probably ever listen to. Enjoy it.
Nice.
100%. I agree with that, man. You guys are both right. I mean, on all fronts, it really was, you know, all of that. And then especially uncompromising. I think in and out of the studio, that band was uncompromising, you know, from the music that they wrote to how they've always run the band. You know, nobody's ever told them what they should or should not be doing. They do it what they want to do. And they are an emotional band, just like you guys said. I agree with that 100%.
Speaking of bands, Alfonso, you have a new album.
Our new record. We have a new record that it's not out yet. It's done. We just finished all the mixes on it and stuff. So now we're just getting the artwork prepped. You know, we're a metal band, and you know, we don't make any bones about that. We love being a metal band, and we're a heavy band. We've always sort of made every record heavier and heavier, so this by far is definitely our heaviest record to date. And I know a lot of bands always say that, but we're really into heavy music, and we love heavy music, and we want to be heavier. But at the same time, we also like bands like Glassjaw and Hopes Fall, so we have a lot of depth in the emotional and sort of things like that. So we made a record. It's all done. We've got the artwork that we're doing, and we're just really thinking about how we want it to be. So the record comes out in January to kind of give us enough time to really lay all our cards out on the table and figure out how we want to proceed with the visual aspect of the record. You know, we're sort of working on all that. So record's out in January. The record will be out January 25th. Be out all over, you know, all sorts of platforms.
Right after my birthday. Perfect.
Right after our bass player's birthday too, yeah. So it'll be out on all platforms. We have a CD release party that we're going to be doing in Lansing, our hometown. It'll be the only CD release party that we do for the record in the Michigan area, and then we'll probably maybe do one more out of state, maybe in Tennessee or something, where we kind of, it's like our second home. So yeah, man, really excited about it. It's you know, we're really stoked about the record.
That's awesome. And I really want to throw out something that you said that I find really refreshing. You said it on Facebook first, and then you said it here too. You know, we're a heavy metal band. We like being a metal band, and like that's something that I find really refreshing, because like since I started podcasting a couple years ago, I've met a lot of dudes in bands. You know what I mean? And it's always like I always get this like prevailing like I talked to a dude after a show one night after a Zao show actually, and I'm talking to him about the podcast and trying to get him to come on or whatever, and like he just played a heavy set with his heavy band, and then is like, yeah, I'm not really that into metal. And I remember just being like, what the fuck, dude? Like, I mean, like, because like it was just one of those like, there you get a lot of that like cool guy image where it's like, Well, I mean, I listen to more refined music. It's almost like they're ashamed of metal.
I just feel like it's just so fucking pretentious to be like that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like we get it, dude. You're a musician. Like, you know, don't peg me to metal. Like, but who gives a shit? If that's what you do, if that's what you like to do, then fucking be, you know, then be all about it. And I think that, you know, the reason why I'm really adamant about saying, like, we're a metal band and we like being a fucking metal band and we listen to metal, because that's really what we are. Like, we never, you know, if we've never had any intention of being anything other than a metal band. Now, are we a one-dimensional metal band? I don't think so. I think we have a lot of layers in between us. You know, we kind of try and get that out in every record that we've done, something here and there. But at the end of the day, we're a heavy metal band and we're going to want to make heavy records. You know, if I wanted to be in a fucking, you know, active rock band, I'd go be in an active rock band and do things like Nothing More and Bad Wolves and stuff, and that's cool too. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just, I don't know what it is, man. It's just so weird, and I think and like you said, it's so prevalent in metal right now. Like, well, I've got more layers to me than just metal. Like, I've been really getting into like bluegrass, and it's like, dude, we fucking get it, bro. Like, you're a musician, we understand.
Yeah, it's cool to like other styles of music. Like, nobody's jumping on your ass about that, you know. Like, it's just
exactly.
But you chose to play metal, so there's got to be some sort of, you know, like I do a metal podcast because I like pop music, dude, but I like metal the best, so that's what I talk about. You know?
Absolutely. And I think, to me, that attitude as well really hurts metal and the scene in general, because that's how we've gotten to a point where, you know, in the industry is like, well, you have to have a single and it has to have, you know, a hook and it has to have all this stuff. And it's like, or maybe we can just make music that we really like and that is heavy, and we can figure out how to make that popular as well. And then so you get into this whole, like, every band sounds the same, every band looks the same. Like, how many bands can you name off of your head right now that have a band picture where they all have their arms crossed, they're all wearing black, and they're in a black background?
I'll do you one better. I'll send you a picture of my band from years ago with us doing the same thing. You know, like, it's like, I get it. Totally get it. You know?
You know, and it's just like, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it breeds a sort of idea in the listener's mind as well as the fans' minds, and then those who want to be in a band, that they're like, no, we have to do this because this is what's going to get us big or popular. And it should just be like, no, dude, like, we started this to have fun and just do this and like be a band. And I get that there's business behind it, but at the end of the day, like, it should be fun and it should be about hanging out with other people and inspiring other people, no matter how you look or how you dress or what songs you make. Like, who gives a shit? It's metal, man. Like, look at Slayer fucking got huge playing death metal, literally thrash death metal. You know, like, if they can do that, anyone can. And I think that sitting there and going, well, you know, I don't really like metal, it's just a real subversive way to be like, well, I want to get bigger, so if I'm only in a metal band, I'm not going to make as much money. And that's not what it should be about. It should not be about that, you know?
Well, we didn't end up asking that dude to be on our podcast. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I don't want to do it. If he's not into it, why would I, you know? Like,
yeah.
I don't want to sit down and talk with a dude for an hour that doesn't want to be here.
Or like you said it best with Glassjaw, who isn't passionate about talking about it, you know?
Right. But yeah, man, where can we, or not we, I know where to find you, but where can our listeners find you and find more info on Heartsick?
You can go all over the internet, and if you just type in Heartsick Band for Facebook, for Twitter, for Instagram, for Reverb Nation, SoundCloud, all that stuff, all of our stuff on any of those sites. So use just Facebook.com/HeartsickBand, you know, Twitter.com/HeartsickBand, Instagram HeartsickBand, and we're pretty active on all social media. We're not the most active sometimes on Twitter, but we try and keep up with it. I do most of the online social media stuff, but definitely we're very active on Facebook and Instagram. Those would probably be the two best places to find us, you know. And then Reverb Nation, we use that a lot. We use that platform a lot, so you can find us on all those three. The easiest with just Heartsick Band.
Very cool. Dude, you have no idea. You definitely saved the day tonight.
Dude, I'm so happy to talk about this. I love this stuff, man. I love talking music and, you know, with people who love the music that I love and love talking about metal. Like, I'm all about that shit, dude.
Well, for sure. It definitely helped us out, and we're glad that we had this talk because, man, It's gonna sound good, you know. It's definitely
Awesome.
gonna sound like something we planned and not like something we just threw together at the last fucking minute, you know.
Well, I thank John for fucking be like, hey, and I'm like, fuck it, dude, let's just do it, man. I really enjoy this, and thank you for giving someone like me and my band the time of day, because I know we're not on the level of bands like Norma Jean or Glassjaw and stuff like that, but we're still up and coming, and it's cool that you would do that for bands like us, because I really think it sends a great message to other bands and other people who really believe in wanting to be in a band, that you don't have to be at those heights right then and there to do something like this. I think that that's really cool, and to me that is really awesome, and I really want to thank you from the bottom of our heart, because that really makes it more interesting, and I think it makes it more influential and really more genuine, you know, that people can be like, you don't have to be Corey Taylor to get on a podcast and have a good conversation. You don't have to be, you know, Terry Day who produces, you know, whatever. You can be a band that's up and coming, and you can be a musician that has, you know, a thought and an idea, and converse with people who are used to talking to people like that and still make it a good thing. So I really appreciate that. We really thank you, man.
Yeah, man, anytime. Well, hey, rock a heavy show for us tonight, and we'll keep in touch, man. We'll do something else soon.
For sure, man. Thank you so much. You guys have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
Party on.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Party on, guard.
Party on, Wayne. And on that note, this has been episode 81 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks. Thank you, Alfonso, for hanging out with us and talking about Glassjaw. We will see you in the future. You can find everything Heartsick online, but especially on major social media platforms. You can search for Heartsick Band. Cheers, sir.